Let's sew a tower placket. Hi, I'm Delphine. I'm the designer behind Dress Patterns, and today I'm showing you how to add this classic detail on a dress shirt, the tower placket. I'm gonna be using the pattern pieces from my latest pattern, the Giselle Shirt, but I'm also gonna be making the pattern pieces available for you to try at home. So if you want to add this detail to any of your shirts, or you just want to practice this really nice detail, you can check the link in the description. And if you subscribe to the newsletter, you can access the pattern pieces that I'm gonna be using today. But let's look first at what a tower placket is. So the tower placket is this really classic way of finishing the slit in the cuff of a shirt. It's what enables you to make the shirt fitted to your wrist so that you can actually close it and still put your hand through the sleeve. So in order to do that, cuff needs to open, to close usually with a button, and you need to extend that opening into the shirt and finish it in some way. This is probably the most classic way of finishing that opening in menswear. In women's wear, you will sometimes see different ways of finishing that slit, sometimes creative original ones. Sometimes you will see just a slit that is continuously bound. So you put bias binding, you do a little stitching here. Personally, it's a finish that I do not like at all. I find it, I don't know, and I really like traditional menswear tailoring details. So that's the one we're gonna be using today. It can be finished in a lot of different ways. Here at the top, it can be a lot of different dimensions. It can be longer, it can be shorter. It depends on trends basically, and if the designer wants to add some original details. Here we're showing something fairly classic, but that you can customize in different ways. So we have a pointy finish. There are two ways traditionally that tower plackets are done, either with two pieces, one for the smaller inside and one for the taller, but here I'm going to be demonstrating a technique that involves only one pattern piece, which I'm going to be showing to you in a minute. And as you can see, it's a really clean finish. When you open it, it's solid, it's clean, it's a really nice finish. So let's look at the pattern pieces that you will need to achieve that finish. We have our sleeve piece, and on this particular sleeve pattern, I like to demonstrate really how the tower placket will look when it's done. And then we have our placket piece. It's a one-piece placket that we're going to be folding strategically in order to achieve that look. We're going to be cutting, and I'm kept the top here straight so that if you want to finish the top of your placket in a rectangular way, you can also just fold it differently at the top. You can also extend it to make it a really long placket. I've seen this recently in designer shirts. I think it's a really cool detail. In our case, we're just going to be folding the fabric under to create that nice V shape. So, after you cut your fabric, it's really important that you transfer the important markings of your pattern. So here we have our sleeve. This is the right side. And you see that we have already transferred with thread marking these three corners of the top of our placket. But I think I'm gonna want also to have here the rectangle that marks the opening where we're gonna stitch the placket and the shirt together. So I'm gonna be doing that. And when I look at the placket piece, I already have transferred the different elements. So I have these two punch holes here that are the rectangle where we're gonna do the openings, and I have the top of my placket. So let me start by adding some thread markings. Luckily this fabric is quite see-through, so it's gonna be really easy. I'm just using cotton basting thread that I doubled into a regular needle, and I stabilized my fabric on top of the pattern with a weight. And I'm just gonna be using a single pass into the hole that I'm marking on one side and the other. So I'm doing 2 holes at once, and I'm gonna let a little bit of the thread before and after, and I'm gonna cut in the middle. And that's it. I have my 2 markings. These are not meant to last very long. The fact that they are cotton rather than regular polyester sewing thread is gonna ensure that they stick a little bit more. There's a bit more friction with the fabric, so they're gonna stay a little bit better inside, and they're less likely to escape, although that happens. Let's take a closer look at our placket piece. So our placket piece already had its thread markings, and what we start by doing is pre-pressing some of the folds to make our life easier in the future. So working on the wrong side with the wrong side up, I start by pressing the edges on each side of my placket, so this shorter edge and this longer edge, and here my intake is 1 centimeter, 3/8 of an inch. And then what I like to do is to also mark where this is gonna be, where the fold line is gonna be in our little placket. So here is gonna be the fold line that we have in the short side of the tower placket, and here you can recognize the long side of the tower placket, and I find it really helpful to already prepare these folds. So I like to do them already now. So I have my first fold, my second fold also at 1 centimeter. I have this first fold at 3/8 of an inch, 1 centimeter. Then the second fold, which I do really straight from my point here, from my punch hole here down to the notch. And the way that I ensure that my pressing lines are crisp and really straight is that at the iron, I use my pattern piece as a pressing template. It helps that I print with regular paper and not with tissue paper. Otherwise, you can just use paper or cardboard or anything that you have lying around. And that's how I press to make sure that I have these sharp, crisp lines. So now that I've pre-pressed, I'm gonna be taking my sleeve, and I'm gonna be placing it wrong side up, wrong side facing up. And I'm gonna be placing my placket onto it with the right side facing down. So it's wrong side of the sleeve to right side of the placket. The notches at the bottom of the sleeve and the bottom of the placket are really important. So I'm gonna be aligning all the notches as well as my thread markings. And what we're going to do is that we're going to go at the machine and we're going to be stitching around that rectangle. So if you want, you can actually mark this line with chalk and a ruler to make sure that you stitch really straight from the notch to the punch hole to the thread mark. You pivot again, and you come down. So I'm gonna be stitching around my rectangle, and because I didn't mark the rectangle, I'm gonna be using something else. I'm using a little bit of this packing tape. I've seen this in a Japanese sewing channel, Atelier Saison, which I love. So I just put it under the left side of my presser foot here, and I align it with the edge of the presser foot. So I'm never going to be stitching on it, but as you can see, it's kind of drawing a really straight line between my notch where I start and where I'm going to pivot. And I'm going to go slow with small stitches. In order to make sure that I don't deviate from my line. I reach my corner. I'm just gonna go one more. I'm gonna be lifting the presser foot, pivoting to the next one, aligning, making sure that I have it straight, and stitching slowly to the next corner. And now we pivot one more time. I position my tape next to the needle, touching the needle, and then here where my notch is at the bottom. And I use it as a guide to finish my rectangle. I'm gonna start by pressing everything flat, removing the thread marks that I'm not gonna need anymore. The tension of my machine is probably a little bit high for this fabric. I'm gonna be reducing it for the next rounds of stitching and pulling out my thread marks. Trust me, you want to do this as you go because some of them might get stuck and it will be frustrating. We're going to open the slit. That's where actually the slit is gonna be. So we have a notch that marks where we're gonna open, and we're gonna stop about 1 centimeter before we reach the top of our triangle, and we're gonna create a V shape, really clipping up to the corner but not into our stitching. And now that that's done, I'm gonna prepare to turn it onto the other side, and for that I like to already press open these seams so that those seams are really neat. I was on the wrong side of my shirt. We stitched around that opening, we made the opening V shape into the corners, and now we pass the placket through the opening, and now it's going to be onto the right side, so I flip everything right side up, and now we have the right side of the placket facing up and the right side of the shirt. And we're just gonna be cleaning these edges around. So we pre-pressed open that seam in order to make sure that we can get it really nice. And I pressed the seam allowances now towards the placket, and my second fold on the small side of the placket, the one I prepared before starting, is coming in really handy. And as you can see, it is covering exactly our last line of stitching. I can secure it with a few pins. And we're gonna come next and stitch onto this folded edge. It needs to cover our line of stitching. I can also prepare my second edge. I'm pressing the seam allowance towards the placket on the big side this time, and you can see that on this side as well the taller placket is coming just to cover and is already sitting well in position. Let's go back to the machine. Let's stitch our short side. I'm going to be aligning folded edge of my placket with the left inside edge of my presser foot. I'm gonna reduce the tension just a little bit. And I go as high as the opening of my placket. A few back stitches, cut. I just went to press my small side of my placket, and now we're gonna be doing a step that I rarely see recommended in sewing patterns, at least in American or French sewing patterns, and I don't really know why, because I find it such a better finish. And what we're going to do is that I'm gonna lay it with the tall side open up to where it's supposed to cover the short placket. I'm gonna be putting a couple of pins just so that it doesn't shift. We're gonna turn it around and we're gonna expose our little V that we cut open earlier, and we're gonna stitch all these layers just on the V. It also ensures that the taller side of your placket will lay in the right spot on top of your short placket. So I'm just coming over our first line of stitching and stitching on top of it. That's it. It's a little thing, but it really makes a difference. We can go back onto the right side, remove our pins, place the tall placket back in position, and we want it to overlap our line of stitching. Maybe secure it with some pins. When you come to the top of the placket, you will have two options. You can either fold it to have a rectangular placket, but I'm gonna be doing a point. I'm gonna use my nails to mark the fold, and I have my thread markings to help me. And when you have that mark, so let's say I fold it this way and then this way, is to invert the way you marked your pleat and to stitch it in that inverted way. And for some reason, It will ensure that the little edges underneath will not show. I learned this years ago from the Off the Cuff blog, a really helpful tip. Also because sometimes it's nice to work at the machine and not get up again to the iron. Let's start stitching. I'm gonna be doing a double line of stitching at the base to secure the top of the tall placket. So I'm gonna be starting from where the placket opens, and I'm 5 millimeters, 3/16 of an inch away from the end of the opening, and I'm gonna be stitching a straight line. I pivot down. I'm gonna be stitching my 3/16, 5 millimeter down. Pivot again. Use my first line of stitching as my guide to make sure that I'm very parallel. I pivot when I reach the pressed edge. And now again, I'm gonna be aligning the inside of my presser foot, the left side, with the folded edge. I'll be removing my thread marks. If I'm not close enough, I'll just do one more stitch. And now we're going all the way down to the bottom of the placket. And there we have our placket completed. I'm gonna give it a good press. Remove my other thread marks. After a good press, this is what our tower placket looks like on the right side. It's really neat. It's almost as nice on the wrong side. It opens beautifully. I can show you the little detail that I was mentioning earlier on the wrong side. So sometimes even in ready to wear, you'll see that the placket here stays open, and that's because that little extra stitching of the V was skipped, but because we added it, it stays really nice and sharp. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned a trick or two as we sewed together these tower plackets. I hope you will never be scared of them in the future. They are really nice and easy to achieve. So don't hesitate to try out the Giselle Shirt pattern that features exactly the same technique. But if you want, you can also download the pattern pieces if you subscribe to the newsletter on my website. You can subscribe to the channel. I have more sewing videos coming and pattern presentations, and I cannot wait to hear your comments.